Go.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. We have the privilege of speaking with former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert. He was Prime Minister from 2006 to 2009. He led his country during the Second Lebanon War in 2006. He also destroyed the Syrian nuclear reactor in 2007. He also served as mayor of Jerusalem from 1993 to 2003. He was the only Israeli prime minister who served time in prison, and he's written a fascinating book called Searching for Peace, a memoir of Israel. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for joining us. Thank you. So it's a fascinating book, and I wanted to begin at the beginning. You were formerly a member of the Likud. You were born in China because your father was involved in Beitar. How did you end up going from Likud, believing in Greater Israel, Shtei Gadot HaYarden, both sides of the Jordan, where you ended up on the other side, where you wanted to make peace with the Palestinians, give away parts of Judea and Samaria and other areas?
Came from China. My grandfather is buried in the Jewish cemetery in Harbin, in northeast part of China, which is known as Manchuria. But I and all my brothers were born in the state, in Israel. Well, actually, before the state was proclaimed, but we are Israeli born.
Israeli born, okay. But your father was in China, so fascinating. Have you been to China?
Yeah, many times.
That's a major player in today's world. So you come from a strong family, Irgun, Beitar, and you yourself were that. At what point in time did you say, I want to change direction and just go in the opposite direction?
Well, I really don't know if it's the opposite. I think that it corresponds with certain basic fundamental principles of what Likud was all about when it was, before Likud even, when it was the Irgun, when the Revisionist Party and the Herut Party of Menachem Begin, long before we established Likud only in 1973. Until then, there was the Herut Party, and the two banks of the Jordan was the slogan that was attributed to the Herut Party in the late 40s, the beginning of the 50s, like 70 years ago and more. The basic principles of the Menachem Begin, who was in many different ways my godfather, was equality and equal rights and respect for the rights of other people. Perhaps this is the main reason why Menachem Begin, who promised that on the day that he will become prime minister, he will annex all the territories, including what he called Judea and Samaria, which is also known in the political debate as the West Bank.
But you used to call it Judea and Samaria too, right?
Pardon?
You used to call it Judea and Samaria at one point, didn't you?
I used to call it this way or the other way. It doesn't matter really. It's, well, I'm not obsessed with these sometimes symbolic gestures. But in any event, the fact is that Menachem Begin, in the 5 years, the 6 years that he was prime minister, never even tried to annex the territories. And the reason he didn't want to annex the territories is not because he didn't feel that these territories are historically part of the Jewish people, but because he understood that it will not work, that it will not be possible to annex the territories without providing the people living there with full equal rights as part of the state of Israel. And if indeed he will do that, then a short time afterwards, in a matter of years, the Palestinians will become the majority in the state of Israel, and Israel will cease to be what it was destined to be, which is a Jewish state. Therefore, he kept it without changing the status quo, but without annexing the territories. And I think that he hoped that one day a guy like me will come up, will become prime minister, and will do what he was unable emotionally to do, which is to say, listen, This is our land. There is no question about it. By the way, I truly believe that this is our land. But sometimes when you want to achieve something which is greater to secure the future, you have to give up something which is yours in order to achieve a greater goal. And so the question is not whether this territory is ours or is theirs. There is no question about it in my mind. All the history of the Jewish people is buried, underground in different parts of the West Bank, okay, in Judea and Samaria. But if we want to maintain the state of Israel as a Jewish democratic state, we have to separate from the Palestinians. Now, there are, broadly speaking, two possible options of separating completely from the Palestinians. One is to expel them, to force them out. And I know, and every sound person knows that this is totally impossible. That if we'll do that, it will be the pariah of the universe for the rest of our existence. We'll never do it. So the alternative is to pull out from territories and to allow them to establish their Palestinian state in the territories, which we believe are historically ours, but which we have to give up for the sake of achieving something which is much more important for the future.
So Israel did pull out of Gaza, for example. Look where it is today. Even certain parts, like Hebron and other areas, I think it was Bibi Netanyahu pulled out parts of Hebron. Look where we are today, where it didn't bring any more peace, only brought more terror.
Number one, we all tend to forget what was Gaza before we pulled out from Gaza. Was it any better? The only thing different is that they didn't have rockets, and now they have rockets. But in terms of daily confrontations with terrorists from Gaza, it was the same and even worse, except for one thing. Now we don't occupy them. And had we had a somewhat smarter approach, I would suggest that we will do things that may contribute to improve the quality of life of the 2 million people that live in Gaza. I'm not talking about the terrorists. The terrorists may be a couple of thousand people, few thousand people that are torturing their people and are torturing the people that live in the south part of the state of Israel because they are taking us with rockets and all this. But if we do not do what I think we could do, we should do, again, not because, don't get me wrong, I don't suggest to do anything because I care for the other side. No, I care for ourselves. I care for our people. I care for our interest. And the question is, what is the interest of Israel? The interest of Israel is that the people living in the Gaza district will become less attracted to support the terrorist groups and more attracted to find a proper way of living peacefully with us, because they may have a lot to lose if they will not do it.
But so far it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked so far.
Yeah, it doesn't work so far because they don't have nothing to lose. You may not know, okay? But the people that live in Gaza, for instance, don't have electricity supply for more than a few hours a day because we prevent it. They don't have enough water because we prevent it. They don't have works because we don't help them move freely and also find jobs, which they used to have in the state of Israel for many years, and so on. So the question is, what can we do, not because we care for them, but because we care for our interests and because we want to create a reality that may be different in terms of improving their quality of life, so that they will really genuinely be reluctant to cooperate with the terrorist organizations. We don't do it, and we hold Gaza in a complete siege, and they don't have any freedom of movement. They can't go out to work in Egypt, for instance, because this is part of the Israeli siege over all of the Gaza district. So now I don't say that if all this will be done, then terror will disappear completely, almost immediately. It will take time. Listen, from their point of view, not from ours, okay? From their point of view, they look at it as if for more than 50 years, they were occupied by us, and they were denied the basic rights that many other people in different parts of the world entertain, like the freedom of movement. They something that limits their options of living in a different way. So they have developed bitterness and hatred and whatnot, and it is reflected in their attitude and in their vicious terrorist attacks against us, which are also influenced by the radical fundamentalist approach of the Islamic parties.
But they don't live as free people in Gaza. Look at the Hamas has control. In fact, even in Jerusalem, when the survey after survey comes out, when given a choice to live in Palestinian Authority or in the state of Israel in Jerusalem, the majority of the Arab residents of Jerusalem say they'd rather live in Israel. They'd have more rights in Israel than they do even under the Palestinian Authority, which is more moderate than Hamas.
If they will, if you ask me about Jerusalem, I will give you twofold answers. One, they are today all the Arab villages, which have never been part of the Jewish state or the land of Israel or Jerusalem, by the way. Beit Hanina, Jabal Mukaber, Isawiya, Walaje, all of these villages which are now surrounding Jerusalem, which is the Arab part of what is called the city of Jerusalem, were never part of the city of Jerusalem, are not connected in any way to the historical memories of the Jewish people, were never the focus of our praying for thousands of years to return back to Jerusalem. We prayed to return back to Jerusalem, not to Jabal Mukaber or to Isawiya. Now, if all of the people that live there, which are now already close to 40% of the population of Jerusalem, will soon become more than 50%. One day they will elect the mayor of the city of Jerusalem, and the mayor of the city of Jerusalem will be a Palestinian. Is that what we want? Is the realization of the Jewish dream of having Jerusalem, the capital of the Jewish people, governed by a Palestinian? Let's face it. Why do we need all these villages to be part of the city of Jerusalem?
Well, the answer is more Jewish. In fact, it's hard for Jews to build in Jerusalem. I was there and saw some of the complications that some of the Jewish residents have in building in Jerusalem. Maybe the solution is to have more Jewish building in Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, until 1967, was the third largest city in Israel. And after the Six-Day War, we have been building in Jerusalem cities that are now part of the city of Jerusalem. Pisgat Ze'ev, which has maybe 80,000 residents. Ramot, which has probably 70,000 residents. Gilo, Har Choma, which is really the official name is Givat Shmuel, named after my deputy when I was mayor of Jerusalem, Shmuel Meir, who was one of the most devoted supporters of building in Jerusalem. And so when we built Har Choma, we named it after him. And there are maybe 50, 60,000 people living there. All of this is outside of the green lines of what was Jerusalem until 1967. So with all due respect, the building outside of the original limits of the city in Jerusalem has been very, very large and very excessive, and it doesn't stop and will not stop. But still, the Arabs are also increasing. And the 350,000 today will be 600,000 in a few years, because the birth rate of the Arab population in Jerusalem is higher than the Jewish. And many Jews leave the city of Jerusalem, particularly the ultra-Orthodox, because they can't afford to buy the expensive houses in Jerusalem. And in those families, they have a chasana almost every year, as you know, because of the so many kids that they have. So they leave They live in Beitar, they live in Modi'in Illit, in Elad, in all of these places which are inhabited by ultra-Orthodox, and they leave Jerusalem. So the prospect is, we have to take it into account. We can't speak in slogans. It's very easy to say all kinds of words. We will do, we will take over, we will build. The fact is that the Arabs are closing the gap between them and the Jews in Jerusalem. And since they are recognized by us as residents of Jerusalem, they have a full right to vote for the mayor of Jerusalem. And in no time, they will choose a mayor. There will be a Palestinian. And the Palestinian will be the mayor of the capital of the Jewish people. Is that what we want? Is that what
I don't think it'll happen, but then we, like I said, we need more Jews in Jerusalem. But you make some good points that Jews have been moving out. But also, when I was there in the old city, certain parts, Jews had trouble getting permits to build. I was shown that house to house.
Listen, I know of Jews that are having troubles building in New York as well. There are sometimes all kinds of zoning regulations in residential areas, which make it more difficult to build, and particularly in a city like Jerusalem, with the old city, with all of the historical buildings which exist and which must be protected, and the areas which are very sensitive to different religions. It's more difficult sometimes. Yes, it's difficult. It's part of life. It's true about the one thing you can be certain about. There is not a policy by any Israeli government that I know of, certainly was not by my government, and not when I was mayor for 10 years, and not when I was prime minister, to create all kinds of obstacles to prevent Jewish building in the city of Jerusalem. So there is not. It's just that sometimes there are difficulties, and we have to take it into account when we try to make a certain projection about what things will be like in the future.
Our guest is former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. His fascinating book is called Searching for Peace, a Memoir of Israel. He wrote the bulk of it in 16 months when he was in prison in Israel. Let me ask you this. You're the first Israeli prime minister to go to jail. Was it politically motivated? It seems like every prime minister in current times, they're looking to put him in prison, whether it's Bibi now and you. Rabin, they went after. What's going on?
I'll tell you only this. I think you have to ask me this question because, how can you ignore it? I mean, it's an historical fact and it's obvious. But I don't want to go into all the details because it will take a lot more time than we have. I can tell you only this, that I was convicted for accepting political contribution of 60,000 shekels, which is about $15,000, that no one saw. No one saw the money. No one know where the money went. I never got it. I was not even accused of getting this money for myself. It was just said that it was donated to me by someone who may have had a certain interest that was connected to me, which was it was a conspiracy. It was financed and manipulated by my political rivals, but I don't want to go into this. What Bibi is indicted for is, and actually he admitted that he used to get presents for hundreds of thousands of dollars on a regular basis. The only excuse that he made was that what's wrong about getting presents from friends? So I leave it to the court. I don't want to go into this. He's now in the middle of his court case, and sooner than later it will be sorted out whether he accepted the gifts legally or illegally. But there is a dramatic difference between the accusations which were put against me and those which he has to deal with now.
Are you referring to the Talansky affair where he supposedly gave you money in brown paper bags? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, all this was for political contributions. I never was accused of getting illegal money from Talansky. I was indicted, but I was never convicted for getting illegal money from Talansky, and certainly there was no bribery involved. he gave me political contributions, and no one ever say that Talansky has his own money or that Talansky has any particular interest for himself to want to give me money. He was referred to me by one of the most distinguished Jews in New York that to help raise funds for me when I was running for mayor of Jerusalem. And the guy that referred him to me was no other than Ludi Jesselson, one of the greatest Jewish
Professor.
in the history of the Jewish community in New York. And because Talansky was raising funds for Shari Tzedek, which was the baby of Ludi Jesselson and Charlie Bendheim. But he raised funds for me, but it was funds which were contributions for my elections, and it was a very valuable funds, and I won those elections, and no one said that this was at the end, of course, it was proved to be absolutely legal money that I got.
Would you say that rivals such as Bibi Netanyahu or Shelley Adelson, who you write about in your book, were they somehow behind your troubles?
Look, Sheldon Adelson spent few $100 million in order to overthrow me. I mean, he established this newspaper, for one purpose only, to overthrow me and to support Netanyahu, to replace me. So what I can say is that Sheldon Adelson made every possible vicious effort to get rid of me.
Would you say he led to your conviction, or had a hand?
Together he and Netanyahu and some of his Netanyahu's assistants created a group of activists. Their sole purpose was to try and get rid of me, and they had a budget. They had lots of people that were working on a daily basis and investigating everything about me in order to try and reach that goal.
Is that because you shifted from Likud to Kadima, from being right-wing to dealing with the peace process? Was that the main motivation?
I don't know what was all of the motivation of everyone involved. I can only say this, that a very, very, very senior leader in the United States of America, and I prefer not to name him, but you can imagine, told me that Sheldon Adelson said to him that we need to get rid of Olmert. And when the guy asked why, he's a good man, he said he's a traitor because he wants to withdraw from the sacred territories of the Jewish people. So this is what was the motivation, at least, of Sheldon Adelson.
What was it like for you to be in prison? Here you are, the prime minister, powerful, and all of a sudden you end up in prison. What was it like for you? What was the transition?
It's not pleasant, you know. You wouldn't want to replace me in that place. But this is something as a strong person, particularly if he knows that he's been misjudged and unjustifiably been convicted. It makes it not pleasant, not easy, but I make good use of the time. I wrote a book which gives my side of the story, and this book became a bestseller in the state of Israel, sold for tens of thousands of copies. So I think that the general perception today in Israel is that many people, I can't tell you how many, you know, I can't give you numbers, but quite a lot of people keep saying all the time in different occasions and different opportunities in the media as well as in public meetings that it's so sad that Olmert is not the Prime Minister of Israel, that they wish he would have come back to that position. So
are you planning to run again? I heard rumors that you're thinking about it.
Thinking is one thing, running is another thing. For the time being, I'm running almost every day. I'm jogging, so I'm running in in Tel Aviv on the along the sea, and it's a great experience, and I enjoy it very much. So everyone who asks me, "Will you run?" I said, "I already run."
But the question is, will you move your jurisdiction from instead of running in Tel Aviv to running towards the Knesset? Are you going to change direction? Is that a possibility?
As I said, for the time being, I enjoy running in Tel Aviv.
Now, when you were in prison, you write that you were a minyan man, but you weren't really before you were part of a minyan. Tell us about that whole experience.
I'm not an observant Jew, but there were a couple of guys there. For them, it was very important that there will be a minyan, and we were only 10 in that compound. So it was very important that there will be a minyan. So I just told everyone, listen, you like it, you don't like it, let's respect what is important for some of us who are here and participate in the minyan. And we did it every day. And I felt very good about it.
Have you continued since, or you missed that part?
Pardon?
You missed that part of being a minyan since you're out?
I don't miss that part on my daily, because as I told you, I'm not observant, but I have enormous respect, first of all, for the faith of others, for what others believe in, and particularly for all the different religions, but definitely first and foremost for my religion and the people of my religion, for whom it's very important. I have enormous respect for it, and I was mayor of Jerusalem for 10 years, and my best partners were the ultra-Orthodox representatives in the city of Jerusalem, which represent a very important section of the city. And they always said, I never promised too much, but I always kept my promises to the last, because I thought that the ultra-Orthodox kids, for instance, deserve to study in the same quality schools, buildings of schools, as the non-Haredim. And when I became mayor and I found out that thousands of Orthodox kids study in caravans under the worst possible conditions, with 40 degrees centigrade heat without air conditioners, and all of this in very crowded caravans, I built tens and more than tens, plenty of schools for the Haredi community, because I thought that they deserved it. And I passed a law when I was Prime Minister. I passed a law which allows the ultra-Orthodox education system to be funded by the government on an equal basis as all the other different schools in the country. And there was a big debate at that time in the cabinet, and even I think that one of the ministers, I don't remember exactly who, but one of the ministers said, if you will pass this law, I will resign. I say to him, no problem, give me your letter of resignation, get out, which he didn't. But I say this because I don't have to be religious in order to respect the ultra-Orthodox community and the Orthodox community of my people. In as long as it is not at the expense of the rights of others, in as long as it doesn't require or doesn't force me to reject other parts of the community at the expense of providing what the Haredim want. So I respected their needs, the legitimate needs, and I did it without any need to squeeze me to do it, because it was within the context of politics. I did it because I thought that it was the right thing to do.
Our guest is former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. His fascinating book is called Searching for Peace, a memoir of Israel. He wrote it during his 16 years incarceration in Israeli prison. What do you make today of the vilification of the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredim, in the Israeli media, the tensions in the government? Has it changed so much from the time when you were Prime Minister?
Definitely changed, because as I told you, I think my basic attitude was different. But let me tell you something. I think that the ultra-Orthodox leadership contributes a lot to this attitude and to this atmosphere.
In
Look,
what way?
Look, the ultra-Orthodox leadership was, from time immemorial, they were never right-wing in the political attitude. They were never believers of Greater Israel. They never thought that settling in the territories is important. You know the position that was advocated by Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, for instance, who say that Pikuach Nefesh is a lot more important than building settlements. And so was the position of all the historical leaders, all of the Poskei Hador of the ultra-Orthodox community. I know exactly what was the position of Rabbi Yitzhak Shalom Eliashiv, and who was one of the greatest rabbis and religious leaders, and what was the position of all the other great rabbis. And now the religious parties, in order to squeeze the former government of Israel, to give them all kinds of things which I'm not certain that they need or that they deserve to get, they are ready to support these extreme nationalistic right-wing attitudes, which were never really natural to them and which are not really representative of their fundamental principles that they believe in. And that's why they have generated this attitude of a large part of the Israeli population that say that you're ready to sell us for your interests.
Actually, though, I think a lot of the thinking of the Israeli religious leaders were that originally Pikuach Nefesh was that you can give up territory. When they saw that didn't work, they turned to the other position where their belief was that giving up territory is a question of Pikuach Nefesh of lives.
I never heard any of these rabbis saying it. This is the interpretation offered by their shlichim, which does not really represent what they think. And I entirely disagree with it. I think that what is represented to them by some of their shlichim is that this is the only way that we can get what we deserve to get in terms of supporting our education system, in terms of support of our yeshivas and so on and so forth. And it's not true. They could get it from me, and that this is the only way to prevent Israel from passing a law which will force the recruitment of yeshiva bochus to the army. I can say here and now, and I will not change my position, my attitude, and I've said it in Israel long ago. I think that Israel should decide explicitly, publicly, and officially that we don't want the yeshiva bocher to serve in the army, we don't need them to serve in the army, and we are ready to negotiate a national service on a partial basis so that they will continue to study in the yeshivas for 2 years, in the yeshivas every day for 6 hours, and then they will do a national service for 6 hours for 2 years, and they will be paid for the national service that they do, so that they will not be cut out from the yeshivas, they will not be forced to serve in the army. And I have no political interest. I simply think that we don't need the yeshivas to serve in the army anyway. The Israeli army doesn't need it. In fact, it will be more damaging to the security of the state of Israel and more a waste of resources to try and recruit them to the army rather than to let them be more involved in the community life on at least a partial basis for a period of time. And I think that can resolve a lot of the conflicts between the Haredim and the non-Haredim in the Israeli society and in Israeli politics.
I have so many more questions. We're going to have to invite you back for a future broadcast. May I recommend your book, Searching for Peace, A Memoir of Israel? While we may not agree on everything, it's an important book. If the book becomes a movie, Mr. Prime Minister, which movie?
Can you show me the book? Okay. It looks nice.
Now he looks nice. Now, if it becomes a movie, which movie actor do you want to portray you? Which Hollywood actor do you want to portray, or Ehud Olmert, if it comes into a movie?
I don't think, number one, I don't expect it to become a movie. Number two, I think that I can play myself quite well. Number three, if worse come to worse, I like Paul Newman, but I heard that he is a little bit too old and he has passed away a few years ago. So we'll see.
Anyway, thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to having you back again, and thank you for engaging in a dialogue. It's so important that we have these communications.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.